The humidity in this room is off the charts. It is like raining in here just from condensation. And check this out. Ugh, water's just coming right in. It's probably, Christ, it's got to be 45 degrees out there. Oh my God, did I nail it or what? It is 45 exactly, well 45 and a half, but just moisture everywhere. Because last night it was like 20 degrees, now it's 45, and you know what that does? It makes humidity. So in the future, in the very near future, I'm going to just frame these walls and insulate them and put in some thermopane windows and new doors front and rear. That's the plan. That's what's going to happen. I can't have this. This is insane. That should have been thrown away long ago. That's from a party we had. Anyway, let's get on with our next segment of all the cars I've owned. Grab this sopping wet door. Oh, that's locked. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of All the Cars I've Owned. So, where we left off, I had just purchased a used 2004 Nissan Frontier with just 9,300 miles on the odometer. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, it was a great vehicle and I enjoyed driving it, but for some reason, this next vehicle purchase actually wasn't a purchase, it was a trade. I traded even up my 1987 Nissan Pathfinder, which I wasn't really doing anything with and was becoming a money pit. So here's the situation. It's, I think it was spring, yeah, probably early spring, late fall, probably late spring, 2005. And I was living in an apartment house that my parents had owned, and I was managing it. I was live-in manager is what I was. Collecting rent, doing property maintenance, painting, repairs, stuff like that. And we had a tenant that lived in the first floor apartment. It was the biggest apartment in the house. And this gentleman had had 5 DWIs. And he had finally quit drinking, so he says. And he got his license back, or was working on it. And he bought himself a car. The car that he bought was, it was actually kind of like my dream car. I always had a thing for these particular cars. The car he had was a 1989 Nissan Maxima SE with the factory sunroof and all the bells and whistles. It was a nice freaking car when it was new. And at the time, I had 3 vehicles. I had the 1970 Pontiac, I had the 2004 Frontier, and I had the 1987 Nissan Pathfinder. By this point, there's a really good chance I may have already sold the Tempest. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly when that sale took place, but I do know I at least had the two. I had the Pathfinder and I had the pickup. And he really liked my Pathfinder. And I was getting really tired of it. I was having an emotional breakup with this vehicle. It's like I needed to get rid of it. I didn't care how. I wanted it gone. The Pathfinder was becoming a money pit supreme and constantly having issues with it. So I said, I tell you what, you just got that Maxima, and I love Maximas. I've always wanted one. You have one. Let's make a deal. And I it's like, you ever do something when you were younger and you look upon your decision later on in life and just wonder what the you were doing? what were you thinking? What was going through your mind? And, like, it was a learning experience. I think everybody needs to make a stupid decision like this once. Hopefully once in their life. I mean, let's put it this way. I did a stupid thing, but fortunately it didn't ruin my life. I know many people, friends and family both, that have done stupid things when they were younger that may have ruined their lives. This was not one of those decisions, but it was stupid. I traded him even up a fairly well sorted out but troublesome rust-free Nissan Pathfinder 4x4 for what later turned out to be the absolute worst vehicle I had ever owned. Hands down, bar none. I have never sunk so low in my life. So let's talk about this car. It was a 1989 Maxima. It was the body style of Maximas to end all body styles. Nissan styled the Maxima for that generation. They think they were made from 1980, early 88, late 88 or early 89, somewhere, to about 1994. And it was a very boxy, very European design. That particular generation was, in my opinion, the most beautiful Maxima ever to roll off the line. They were Japanese built, so the quality was up. They were styled almost after the BMW 3 Series of the time. I see a lot of similarities to the 3 Series in that generation Maxima, in the body lines. It had some early 90s style to it, or design aesthetic that's unique to the early 90s. And some of you older Macintosh enthusiasts might know exactly what I'm talking about. It just had that look, that computer age design, that sleek, modern design that could only come from the early 90s. It was beautiful. It had the V6 engine I believe they all had V6. I forget which engine. Was it the VQ30 something? VG30? I forget which motor it had. It was a rock solid engine. One of Nissan's best engines ever. And it had the automatic transmission, but hey. It had the sunroof, power windows, power door locks, AC, cruise, tilt, wheel. I forget what it had for a stereo. I think it was the factory stereo. It had the factory alloy wheels still intact, and it was black on black. The car wasn't beautiful in its current state, but I saw potential in it. I'm like, I could do something with this car. I could make this a nice cruiser. I couldn't have been more wrong. I didn't do any, it was a decision based entirely upon emotion. And it was a dumb decision because I didn't really look at the car. I didn't even test drive it. I just said, yeah, it runs and drives. You got it here. Here's the paperwork for mine. Give me yours. Good, done. In New Hampshire, we don't do titles for vehicles older than the year 2000. The state rule used to be any vehicle over 15 years, it started out, I believe, as 10 years, and then it went to 15, and then it was year 2000 and prior. So this vehicle was title exempt in the state of New Hampshire, as was my Pathfinder. So the only thing we really did was exchange a bill of sale and a handshake. That was it. Very, very simple process. This car, it had some paint flaws. It didn't really have any surface rust on the body. The interior was intact, but here's the kicker. The car had 230,000 miles on it. But it ran and drove really well. It actually did run and drive quite well. It shifted fairly smoothly. It didn't really have any issues in that department. But none of the windows, the only window that worked was the driver's side window. All the other windows were broken. Not broken, but the motors didn't run. They had electrical and motor problems. But the sunroof worked. I believe the AC worked, which was a rarity. But I thought, you know what, put a little bit of time and love into this car and I'm going to just enjoy it. And the idea here was I was commuting, I had a very long commute, and I wanted to keep the miles off my truck, which seems kind of stupid. And anyway, it was just a dumb move. So what ended up happening with this car is I got a 20-day plate. Now in New Hampshire, you can take your bill of sale and a previous registration or a VIN verification form from the local police department, and you go to your local, in this case we go to the town clerk, and they would sell us for a nominal service charge a temporary plate. It's a paper plate. It's good for 20 days, and then in that time you've got to get the car registered, inspected, and then eventually registered and get it roadworthy. So I did exactly that. I got the plate, started driving the car, and then I brought it to a car wash and I got it really cleaned up nice. And that's when I looked underneath the car and my heart sank and I was just like, what the hell did I just do? This car was at risk of breaking in half. And I mean that literally. The entire undercarriage by almost right above the rear wheels, like the wheel wells were gone. There was nothing there. I could see inside the car. And I knew better. You know what? I saw in this car what I wanted to see, and that was it. It was completely gone. There was no saving this car. The wheel wells were just gone. The rocker panels were rusting on the inside where I couldn't see it. I could peek in there with a flashlight, and I'm like, they were gone. The floorboards were solid. The front end of the car was solid, but the rear half was just roached out so bad. And with a little bit more time, I could have pointed these flaws out, but I didn't. So I was facing that. Power windows that didn't work. The engine ran like a top though. 230,000 miles, it ran great. So I just started driving this car around and I was abusing it. I just started, you know what, the car is worthless. It's mine now. There's no going back on this. It's mine. The engine started running a little rough, and I found that the injector plugs were starting to get corroded. So I unplugged them and I sprayed them with some contact cleaner. Cured that problem real quick. It had some oil leaks, but I wasn't worried about that. But this car was just gone. I drove it for the 20 days the plate was good for, just to get out my frustrations. Like I'd be driving on a vacant highway at 65 miles an hour, and I'd slam it into reverse to see what would happen. Nothing happened. Put it in park. Nothing happened. And I was a young kid, not really thinking that if the wheels actually did lock up, what would happen then. But, and not only that, but I don't think I ever insured the car. In New Hampshire, little fun fact, New Hampshire is, I believe, the only state left in the Union that does not require insurance to this very day. So I never insured the car, I just drove it. And, that's why in New Hampshire you have to carry uninsured motorist protection. Everyone who has insurance has to carry uninsured protection. This way, if you're hit by an uninsured driver, you are covered. But as far as I understand it, you can drive in New Hampshire with a New Hampshire registration and license without insurance. But you can't drive in Massachusetts or Maine or Vermont or any of the other states that require liability coverage. I never said I was smart. I just said I was hard-headed and just foolish. But anyway, I drove the car. I got some money's worth out of it. I would just basically I was trying to kill it. I mean, what are you gonna do with a piece of shit car? So what ended up happening was I parked the car at my grandparents' house. They lived 50 miles away from where I was living at the time. And I just parked. They had a spot in their yard. It was a concrete slab where you could have parked like a camper or something. And I just left it there, and I basically left it there to rot. And my grandmother called me about a year later. The car had I just let it sit there. I didn't do anything else with it. Didn't put any money into it. I didn't do anything to that car. I just put gas in it. I don't even think I changed the oil. I just drove it for the hell of it. But anyway, I let the car sit there for a good 6 months to a year or so. And my grandmother called me and said there was a guy who saw the car from the road and he wanted to buy it from me. And I'm like, all right, you can give me his number. So I got the number. And so it was an interesting conversation. I called the guy and he said that used to be my car. And I'm like, there's no way that was your car. The car is not from around here. The car actually came from Lawrence, Massachusetts, if you can believe it. That's where the car actually came from originally. It was from Lawrence, the big city of Lawrence. Place you don't want to be there in the wrong place at the wrong time, that kind of place. And like the car had been in Lawrence for, as far as I can tell, most of its life, or in that area. So I don't know how this could have been your car, but okay, I'll play. And he said, yeah, I want to buy your car. I'm like, well, you know the car's got issues. And I explained, its windows don't work, it's got an exhaust leak. It had an exhaust leak. All V6 Nissans had exhaust leaks. This, and this. It's got major rust and blah, 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 blah. And he said, I don't care, I want to buy it anyway. I'm like, all right, well, what do you want to do here? I said, well, tell you what. You can have the car. I said, I don't even want any money for the car. You can have it. You can have this car. It is yours. Just grab a tow truck. I'll mail you a bill of sale, and we'll be done with it. I have no possessions in the car. It's good to go. And he said, no, I insist. I'll give you all this money for it. I'm like, what? Okay, fine. At this point, I'm getting upset. I wanted the car out of my grandparents' yard. That's what my goal was. And I was actually planning on scrapping it. That was going to actually call the tow truck and just surrender the car, and they get paid from the scrapyard. That's how they make their money on those. And he said, no, I'll take it. Okay. So I said, you have my permission. You can just grab the car with your tow truck, and it's yours. Okay. So I didn't really hear anything back, and I wasn't really expecting to. And so then I get another call from the guy. And I said, or he told me that I should backtrack a little bit. He actually worked for a used car lot in that town, in Swansea, New Hampshire. He worked for a used car lot. It was near Keene. And he gave me the business address and the name and everything. It was all legit. I actually called the dealer's phone number, and it was all legitimate. So, long story short, he calls me back, and he's all pissed off at me. And I'm like, what is wrong? What's going on? And he's, the car is a piece of junk, and oh my God. I'm like, what do you mean? I told you it was a piece of shit. I told you. And he said, the brake line's let go. And I'm like, yeah, and your point? I said, you can have the car if you want it. Just take it out. No, I need to give you money now. Oh, that was like... So I drove up to the place. It was legitimate. And, he had a check for me and everything, and he was mad, and he's giving me this money, and I'm like, what is your deal, pal? I give you the car, and now you're mad at me? Because that was the most bizarre... That was one of the most bizarre transactions I had ever gone through in my life. Buying anything or selling anything, because the guy was just, I don't know, he was just not right in the head. But I got $200 out of the deal. I mean, it's a far cry from the $5,000 or some change I put into the Pathfinder, but that was the worst deal I ever made. And it was my fault. It's like, you see something that you want to believe that is the car that you've been looking for years, and you acquire it, and it turns out to be the worst thing ever. So, I would say I learned from my mistakes. But I didn't. Because I did the exact same thing again. At least twice. You know what it is? I think I have, or had, now I'm more controlled, but I just wanted things to, I just wanted to wrench. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to acquire a piece of junk and make it new again. That's a recurring theme throughout my life to this point, where I like to take junk and make it nice again. And there's a lot of guys on YouTube who do exactly that. And they started out exactly the way I did. And they just kept going with it. I stopped doing it because it was starting to drain my resources financially. But it was fun. It was so fun to take a piece of crap vehicle like my Volkswagen, my Pathfinder. And even I was planning on this Maxima being my next project. And I didn't have the facility. I didn't really have the resources financially at the time, and it just didn't work out. But, you know, you have to do stupid things in life to ground yourself, to make sure that, okay, this is what happens when I do this. This is what could happen. These are the options. That is the story of my beloved '89 Maxima. Now, to this day, that car is definitely it's definitely been scrapped for metal. There's no way that car is still on the road. In fact, it shouldn't have been back then. But you know what it was? I wanted a car with a sunroof, and that was one. I still had my 2004 Frontier as a daily driver, and things got better. I got a better job and made more money, and I'm still at that job, and things are working out. But when you're young, you do a lot of dumb things. And Dave Ramsey wasn't around to steer me on the right path. I had to figure it out myself the hard way. Well, thank you for watching.